Good morning, class. This is English lesson 126, and it is on comparing more and most. But we are going to start with warming up, reminding ourselves the difference between adjectives and adverbs. So go grab your English binder and your whiteboard, and I'll see you in a second. Okay, I trust you have your whiteboard with you. We're going to write down a few things about adjectives and adverbs before we try to find them in a sentence. So let's review. Adjective describes or modifies what? Write this down on your whiteboard. An adjective modifies a... Got that? Okay, now write down the questions it answers. An adjective asks... Pause your video and finish writing all 3 questions down. All right, let's check and see how you did. An adjective modifies a noun or a pronoun. If you just wrote down noun, that's fine, because in 4th grade, that's the only thing you're going to be looking for, not pronouns. An adjective asks, what kind? Which one? And how many? Hopefully you have written those 3 down. If not, that's okay. We need to keep practicing it. Erase your board. Let's try the adverb now. An adverb modifies or describes what? Write that down. And now an adverb asks what? 3 questions. Write those down on your whiteboard. If you need more time, go ahead and pause your video, but let's see if you got these right. An adverb describes, it's in the name, a verb. If you wrote verb, adjective, or another adverb, that's great, but you're only required in 4th grade to find the adverb based on the verb. An adverb asks how, when, and where. All right, so hopefully you have those memorized. If not, we're going to keep practicing them because you do definitely need to know these for finishing 4th grade. Let's see if we can find now the adjective and the adverb. This is where all this memorization pays off. Can we actually find them in a sentence? Let's start the way we always start, by finding the subject and the verb. Read this sentence with me. The blue dog quickly ate the yummy meat. If you'd like to pause your video and write this down on your whiteboard, that would be great. Let's do that now. Okay, you've written this down. Let's read it again and let's ask our questions to find the subject and verb. The blue dog quickly ate the yummy meat. What quickly ate the yummy meat? Dog. What is being said about dog? Dog. Did he quickly? I don't know how to quickly, but I do know how to eat, and that's what the dog did. The dog ate. Okay, so we've got our subject, which we know is a noun, and we've got our verb. But let's go ahead and find any other nouns in this sentence. There's usually only one verb. Sometimes there's more than one. There's usually only one verb. There's often more nouns. So let's find all the rest of the nouns. A noun is a person, place, or thing. Can you find another person, place, or thing? Meat, that's a thing. And that's our last noun. So now we can find our adjectives and our adverbs. To find the adjective, go, ask, get. Where do I go? To the noun. So here's a noun. And what do I ask? What kind? Whoops, I wrote that. What kind? What kind of dog? Oh, already you have an answer. It's a blue dog. So I can say that is an adjective. I hope you're doing this on your whiteboard with me. So I have that adjective. Is there any other adjective that describes dog? If you said the, you can use that. That's an article adjective. You could put that as your adjective, but it's not our main adjective. Article adjectives are a special kind of adjectives. Okay, let's go to our other noun. Meat. Go, ask, get. Where do I go? To the noun. What do I ask? What kind of meat? Already you found it. It's yummy meat. That's our adjective. Is there another adjective describing meat? If you said the, you're correct. That's another article adjective. Remember, unless you're asked, you don't have to underline or highlight article adjectives. You can just find the adjectives. Okay, so we found all of our adjectives. It's time to find our adverb. It describes a verb, so we have to go, ask, get. Where do we go? To the verb. And what do we ask? Ate how? Quickly. So there's our adverb right there. And now look, you guys, you have found what every part of speech is in this sentence. That's pretty cool. You're pretty advanced. Give yourself a pat on the back. And let's go on to another sentence. Let's go ahead and erase your whiteboard and write down this sentence on your whiteboard. A giant eagle stared boldly at the little boy. Write that down on your whiteboard. All right, let's start reading our sentence. If you need more time, go ahead and pause the video. Let's read our sentence and find the subject and the verb. Read it with me. A giant eagle stared boldly at the little boy. Who stared boldly at the little boy? Eagle. What is being said about eagle? Eagle stared. So we have our subject and we have our verb. Let's see if there's any other nouns. A noun is a person, place, or thing. Are there any other persons, places, or things in this sentence? There's a boy. That's a person. And that's it. Those are all of our nouns. So now we have to find our adjectives and our adverbs. To find our adjective, we go to the noun. So here's our first noun. We go to the noun and we ask, what kind of eagle? Yeah, giant. It's a giant eagle. That's what kind. It answers that question. It has to be an adjective. Let's go to our other noun, boy, and ask the same questions. What kind of boy? Little. That's right. Now, we kind of got lucky on both of those that it was the very first question that we asked that gave us our answer. Sometimes you have to go on to the second or the third one in order to find it. So don't give up if you don't see the answer right away. Do you see any article adjectives, those special adjectives, those teeny tiny adjectives? If you said the, you got that one. What are the article adjectives? Let's name them. We are the article adjectives, teeny tiny adjectives, A and B. Here's another one, A. So you could mark that one as an article adjective. Okay, that's all of our adjectives. Now it's time to find our adverb. To find the adverb, we go to the verb. I hope you said that. And then we ask our questions. Stared how? Boldly. That's how he stared. That is our adverb. Now, we've labeled every single word except one in this sentence. The word at, we don't know yet. You're going to learn this after we study adjectives and adverbs. You're going to start learning your prepositions. And at is a preposition. At is a preposition which begins a prepositional phrase. So that's a peek forward into the future. All right, that's enough for you on adjective and adverbs. Let's get on with lesson 126. All right, we learned yesterday that when we are using adjectives and adverbs, we have to change their endings, their suffixes sometimes, depending on the length of the word. So when we have short adjectives and adverbs, like the word long, that's one syllable, long, or the word fast, fast, that's one syllable, fast. When you have short words like that and you're comparing things, you use different suffixes. If you're just comparing two things, you would use the suffix long. ER. So long becomes longer when you're comparing two things. If you're comparing more than two things, then long becomes longest. And the same with the adverb fast. Fast, when you're comparing two things, becomes faster. Like she is faster than I am. There's two things, she and I, that we're comparing. But it becomes fastest when you're comparing more than two things. Like She is the fastest of everyone in the class. That's way more than 2 people, so we have to use fastest instead of faster. But what do you do when your adjective or adverb is not short, like long or fast? What if it's a long word? That's what we're going to learn today. All right, let's try this together now. If adjectives are long or adverbs are long words like expensive, that's 3 syllables, expensive, or carefully, carefully, those are long adverbs and adjectives. What do we do then? Here's the rule. You use the word more before the word expensive when you're comparing 2 long things, or 2 things. You use the word most when you're comparing more than 2. So before, with the short ones, we used ER if it was 2 things. Now we're going to use more instead. And before we used EST to compare more than 2 things. Now we get to use the word most instead. Let's see what that looks like. Inline skates are blank, then roller skates. We're going to use the word expensive. Normally, if I'm comparing skates and skates, that's only 2 things. Inline skates and roller skates. Normally, I would put an ER on the end, but that would mean it would say inline skates are expensiver than roller skates. That's not right, because expensive is a long word. So I'm going to keep the word expensive, but I'm not going to change it to expensiver. Instead, since there's just 2 things, I'm going to use the word more before it. Inline skates are more expensive than roller skates. That's right. Look at this one. Skateboards are the, This is going to be comparing all skateboards. That's way more than 2. So that's going to be using most. That's what we use when there's more than 2. So I would say skateboards are the most expensive. Notice that I didn't change the word expensive at all. I also didn't say expensivest because expensive is a long word, not a short word. Okay, so it says skateboards are the most expensive. That's correct. Now let's look at adverbs. The rule for adverbs is very similar. We use more when we are comparing 2 things, and the adverb ends in ly. Most of our adverbs do, so that's kind of easy. And we're going to use most when we're comparing more than 2, and the adverb ends in ly. So it's the exact same rule as adjectives. More if there's 2, most if there's more than 2, but the caveat is that we have to make sure our adverb ends in ly. Well, this one does. The adverb here is carefully. So let's see how we use this. Leslie picked up the puppy blank, then the mother dog did. How many things am I comparing? Leslie picked it up and the mother dog picked it up. So 2 people or 2 things picked up this puppy. That means I'm going to use more. And as I did with expensive, I don't change the spelling of this word. Carefully. Now, if this had been a short word, I would have said carefully-er, but that's not a word. Let's try this together. Leslie picked up the puppy more carefully than the mother dog did. That's right. Because carefully is a long adverb and it ends in ly, we have to use more to compare 2 things. How about this one? She lifted the smallest puppy, This is comparing her picking up all of them. And so that has more than 2 things. So I'm going to leave carefully here. And instead of saying she lifted the smallest puppy the carefulest, it's not a word, since carefully is a long adverb, we use most. She lifted the smallest puppy the most carefully. So those are your 2 rules. If it's a long word, a long adjective or a long adverb, we're going to use more if we're comparing 2 things, and most if it's comparing more than 2 things. Whether it's an adverb or an adjective, you just have to make sure that your adverb ends in ly. And if it's a short one, you go back to yesterday's. You add er. If it's 2 things, est, if it's more than 2. Let's practice this. let's decide if we need to use more or most here. Camels are probably the blank famous of all desert animals. Okay, same as yesterday, we have to decide how many things are being compared. Camels are probably the blank famous of all desert animals. We're comparing camels with all the desert animals. Is that two things? Or is it more than two things that we're comparing? The camels would be one thing, but all the desert animals, that's a lot more than two. So I'm going to be using most because it's more than two. Most famous. And famous is a bigger word. It's a longer word. It's 2 syllables. So most would go in front. Camels are probably the most famous of all desert animals. That works. Let's try this one. The Bactrian camel has blank humps than the dromedary camel. How many things are we comparing? We have the Bactrian camel and the dromedary camel. That's 2 things. So since we're comparing 2 things, we're going to use the word more. The Bactrian camel has more humps than a dromedary camel. And you might be going, but Mrs. Huff, humps? That's a short word. But that's a noun. It's a thing. It's not an adjective. So Bactrian camel has more humps than dromedary camel. Let's try this one. Camels are the blank useful way to carry heavy loads in the desert. Well, what are we comparing here? Are we comparing camels? No. Well, we could say camels are one way of carrying things, but we're also carrying all the heavy loads. So one thing we could use to carry a heavy load would be a camel. Another one would be a car or a truck or an elephant. There's all kinds of ways. So when we compare camels carrying and all the different ways we could carry other heavy loads, it's way more than 2. So we are going to use the one that you use for more than 2, the word most. Camels are the most useful way to carry heavy loads in the desert. Okay, so we have discussed more and most when the word is long, and yesterday we discussed using ER or EST if the word is short. So let's use both of those to decide what goes in our blanks here. The word they want us to use is skillful. Let's read the sentence. Camels are blank than horses at surviving in the desert. Skillful, is that a short word or a long word? It's a long word. It's 2 syllables. So we are not going to use yesterday's ER and EST for this one. We're going to use today's rule. So now we have to decide how many things are being compared. Camels are, than horses at surviving in the desert. I'm using camels and I'm comparing them with horses. That's only 2 things. So I'm going to use my rule for when I'm comparing 2 things, and that would mean I use the word more. More, and I just copy skillful. More skillful. Let's see how that reads. Camels are more skillful than horses at surviving in the desert. There we go. Let's try this one. Camels drink water blank than cows do. And the word they want us to use is fast. Is fast a short word or a long word? It's short. It's 1 syllable, fast. So we're going to use yesterday's rule. So think back to yesterday's rule, and let's see how many things we're comparing. Camels drink water, than cows do. We're comparing camels with cows. That's only 2 things. So yesterday's rule taught us that if we're comparing 2 things, what's the suffix we put on the end of fast? ER. Fast-er. Let's see how that reads. Camels drink water faster than cows do. Sounds right. Let's try this last one. Items made from camel hair are the in the desert. The word they want us to use is plentiful. Plentiful just means there's a lot of it. Is plentiful a long word or a short word? It's long, plentiful. It's 3 syllables. So we know we're going to be using plentiful and today's rule, either more or most, depending on what we're comparing. This says items made from camel hair are the in the desert. What are we comparing here? It might be a little tricky. It's just items made from camel hair. Is that one thing? I mean, is it two things or more than two things? Probably way more than two things are made out of camel hair in the desert. So it's more than two, therefore I'm going to use the word most. Most, and I just copy the word plentiful. Now let's see how that reads. Items made from camel hair are the most plentiful in the desert. And that's how you do today's work. I think you have a quiz today that will take you to a place where you get to choose more or most. Please take your rule with you. If you need to write it down on your whiteboard to remind you, do so that you can keep straight the rules for adding ER and EST or more and most if it's a long word.